West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Florida's Democratic Party is demanding an investigation into reports of possible voter registration irregularities after some people claim they were duped into changing their party affiliation. The party's chair sent a letter to Florida's Secretary of State expressing concern over reports that senior citizens in a Miami-Dade public housing complex unknowingly had their party changed after updating their voter registration with people who ended up working on behalf of the Florida Republican Party. The controversy is highlighting these comments from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis back in November.
Today, for the first time in the history of Florida, we've now overtaken Democrats. There are more registered Republicans in Florida than Democrats.
360's Randy Kay has the story.
They don't say they're going to change me to the party.
77-year-old Juan Salazar is a Democrat, or at least he used to be. In December, Salazar says someone wearing a bright red baseball cap approached him and switched his party affiliation without his consent.
You were a lifelong Democrat.
From 1978.
And now, all of a sudden, you're a Republican.
I'm a Republican.
You don't want to be a Republican.
I don't want to be.
He says it all happened at his housing complex in Miami, Florida. It's home to elderly, low-income residents who speak little English. He says he now believes it was a Republican who told him he needed to update his registration. But keep in mind, in Florida, once you register to vote, there is no reason to update that registration unless you want to make a change like your party affiliation. That was not the case with any of the people we spoke with.
This is the old card.
That's an old card.
And it says right here, Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And the new card says Republican Party of Florida. And that's not what you want.
No, I want to be Democrat.
Juan isn't the only one who may have been targeted. Miami resident Ernesto Morajon told us a lady in a red hat came to his door to try and register him as a Republican, even though he's a Democrat.
Now, I asked to her, are you Republican? And she told me, yes.
Ernesto refused to sign the form, but he says his sister and brother-in-law, both Democrats who live elsewhere in Miami-Dade County, had their registrations changed after being fooled.
It doesn't seem like a one-off kind of mistake. It is a concerted effort.
Senator Annette Taddeo is the vice chair of the Ethics and Elections Committee in Florida's Senate. After receiving at least a dozen calls from concerned Democratic voters, Taddeo sent this letter to Florida's Secretary of State, a Republican, requesting an investigation.
About 10 minutes from where Juan lives, we found another woman who says her voter registration was changed from Democrat to Republican. She lives here. She didn't want to go on camera, but told us a woman had knocked on her door and told her that she needed to update her voter registration because it had expired.
That woman's daughter sent us these pictures her mother took of the woman she says recently changed her voter registration. Look closely at her ID. It says RPOF. That stands for Republican Party of Florida. The woman's daughter says her mother signed the form, but says after that, someone checked the box Republican Party under party affiliation. And her daughter says there is no way her mother could have checked that box on her own since it's in English, and her mother doesn't speak or read English.
It is not legal to fill out the form for people.
Yet the woman's voter registration was still changed. That's her old card on the left. It reads Democratic Party. Her new card on the right shows she's now registered with the Republican Party of Florida. All of this could have real consequences. Florida is a closed primary state. So in a primary election, you can only vote for a candidate that is aligned with the party you're registered with.
It seems like they're filling out the form for them because they, not knowingly, again, lifelong Democrats, would never have checked Republican Party of Florida. It does raise some very big red flags.
So Randy Kay with me now. Randy, what does the state's Republican Party have to say about this?
Well, John, we reached out to the Republican Party of Florida, and the executive director told me that the party conducts voter registration in accordance with all applicable laws and regulations. She also said that they will review any report of concern and that election integrity is important and continues to be a priority for the Republican Party of Florida. But, John, I can tell you that there are hundreds of these third-party voter registration organizations throughout the state, and it is legal for them to reach out to voters. When it becomes a problem is if they didn't register with the state, or if they are filling out these forms for the voters instead of having the voters do it themselves, or if they're changing party affiliation without the voters' consent, then it becomes illegal, and that's what they're investigating. But I should also note that all of the voters we spoke with have already reached out to the Board of Elections. They're asking that their party affiliation be changed back to the Democratic Party. They are eagerly awaiting their new voter registration cards, hoping they'll come in the mail real soon. They haven't received them yet, but they're looking forward to becoming a member of the Democratic Party here in Florida once again, John.
Quite a story. Thanks so much, Randy Kay. Miami-Dade County's Mayor, Daniela Levine Cava, joins me now. Mayor, thank you so much for being with us. How many voters have you heard from here, and what are you asking for? You're concerned about this.
Yes, John, we're very concerned. We first learned about this in September. We immediately brought the case to the attention of the state attorney's office. And then in December, there was a news story, and we followed up. And now in February, we actually have photographs of a person who was admitted to this building. And we've heard now from dozens of people. And we're working with the state attorney's office to make sure that every single case is investigated and corrections made, and that we can find and resolve this. It's really a shameful situation. Here we have our democracy under attack, people who are really very vulnerable to this kind of fraud. So we're doing everything we can to resolve it and fix it.
What are you hearing from authorities on this about their investigation?
Our state attorney, Kathy Rundle, has issued a statement that she is going to fully investigate these cases, and my office is continuing to do its due diligence to bring cases forward.
Now, one of the things, my understanding is in Florida, you don't have to do anything. If you're registered as a Democrat in Miami-Dade County and you live in one place, you never have to change anything. So this is someone actively going in and somehow doing something with you to get your documents shifted here. So there does appear to be at least some concerted effort from somewhere going on.
So I've understood that some people have been approached by saying, would you like your new voter registration card? So obviously people who are regular voters, they are concerned. They want to be sure they're up to date and everything is ready for the next election. So I think that people really are very, very vulnerable to this.
Have you heard from the governor at all on this?
No, I haven't. Certainly, we believe that this is something that should be of great concern to him and to the legislators who want to be sure that our election process is free and fair. And we hope that the Republican Party of Florida will be doing its due diligence to make sure that all of their voter registration outreach is done correctly.
And just finally, up until this point, have you heard of any cases or many cases where people's registrations are being shifted from Republican to Democrat?
No, sir, I have not.
It is Tuesday, the 8th of February of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small, scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Okay, well, you could try the Spanish kind, all right? It's a little expensive because there's less of it, but I will give you a professional opinion. In fact, I don't think it's so much an opinion. It is a consensus among professionals, and that is they're both of equal quality. Just saying. One's more expensive only because of scarcity. Remember that when you are complaining about inflation. Forced scarcity on a lot of things. Now, Spanish paprika, it's scarce because there's only so much to Spain. And apparently, Hungary has a lot more space to do its Hungarian paprika. Actually, I think it's because it spreads much further in that part of the world, not constrained by borders constructed by humans. All right. At least in the plant world. Fungus, too. You know, there's a whole society of life living underneath our feet right now. Much more numerous than we. I kid you not. Get into mycology and you'll find out. You'll be frightened if you're that type. There's a lot of grade B 1950s science fiction movies that address that potential problem head on. Yeah, Attack of the Mushroom People. Check it out. Come on. Okay, well, it is Tuesday, and we're beginning the week. And, hey, it looks like we're going to need a Presidential Records Burn Bag Act. What the hell? You know, this guy does everything a mobster does, and I don't know why people like Maggie Haberman are just like giving this guy an excuse. Oh, in his haste to get out of the... Because he waited too long. He spent most of his time trying to hold on to power, and then when they had to actually finally leave the apartment, they thought they would trash it like a bunch of frat boys. Let's take everything off the walls, guys. Hey, does it mean there's a toilet and urinal too? If it's on the wall, take it off. Well, the toilet's on the floor. I don't take it off. You know, this guy's a frat boy. He's never grown up. Well, prep school. But, you know, it's like the frat house got finally closed down because a bunch of juvenile delinquents with money were terrorizing the neighborhood. They shut the frat house down. And what does the frat boys do on the way out? They trash the house. Okay. Take everything off the walls, guys. Even this urinal, if it's on the wall, take it off. I've seen that happen. Well, I've not seen it. I've seen the results. Don't lease a building to a frat house as a frat house. If you're a property owner and you think, oh, wow, you know, it's like steady income, I don't have to worry. Yeah, you should worry. Okay. So, yeah, the guy should have never been able to get into our house to begin with, but somehow he got in there. And he, as his aides and people have said, do you think this guy's going to follow the Presidential Records Act? Come on. None of our conventions, none of anything that made us a representative democracy, I have to say, the shining light to the world, none of that mattered to him. He knew little of it. He was too busy ripping urinals off the walls of the frat house. And apparently no one, took him to heel. Not even Mom. And apparently Mom was a rather stern figure. Tried to fill him with some sort of moral code. But I don't know. Look at her husband. Moral code. Yes, I'm a Scottish conservative. That's why we have whorehouses as our base income. And that's not, putting down women of the night or women of the day, depending, belle de jour, because, they're caught in this imperialistic, capitalistic system of dog eat dog. I'm not saying that. But, the procurer, I think, maybe that's a manipulative bastard. So much for Ma Trump and her Scottish conservatism, huh? Well, I don't know. Maybe she's a Mason. She knows some sort of secret of the universe. When the meteor's finally going to come and take us all out. Maybe that's what they know. We added it up. We put an angle and the compass together, and the next thing we know, we can tell the future. All right. Good for you. It's still trajectory. All right. It's not rocket science. The world we live in. And now, I got to tell you, there's some sort of trigger that hits these lizard brains out here in the world. Not just here in Southern Oregon, but I'm just giving you some anecdotal experience, shall we say. Because when I look at other message groups and, Facebook and elsewhere, it all seems to be the same language. It's the language of the Canadian truck convoy, which apparently is being planned for D.C. and apparently by the same people who planned January 6th. Yeah, I bet that's going to be fun. We have a story about that coming up at the chef's table, too, because it is international. We like to do the international at the chef's table. Unless we have somebody sitting there. And then we'll do something else. But for now, we do the international. Amuse-bouche. Canadians aren't very happy with Ted Cruz and the rest of the GOP insurgents here in the United States. Sure not. So the world we live in, where lizard brains become triggered and they have the same meme, the same rhetoric. Where do they get it? I think it might just be ingrained, decades of Limbaugh and Fox. I think that if you put your energy to that, it might take hold, and apparently it has. If a hostile foreign power was bent and taken over the United States of America, they know which ones are easily programmed now, don't they? So, how does that fit in with what's going on locally with my anecdotal experience? It seems the anti-mask, anti-vaxxers have become activated again, which only is a precursor to all the rest of it. That the insurgency was really just a legitimate political discourse, which is, just the legitimate rape of its day. Because the supposed brave Americans are the depraved Americans, the anti-mask, anti-vax contingent. Because I shall say, it is much more than just that. It is also birtherism and all the racism and all the bigotries against any group that is not them. And they seem to be pissed. I mean, they got stuff out there saying, we will not take it anymore. Well, take what? You've been getting away with absolutely everything forever. Sorry that you're going to have to finally clean up your yard, you slob. You're making the rest of the property values around here go down because of your inattention to self. And because of that, the community has to step in and say, hey, wake up, Clyde. No, these people are aggressive. They don't want to follow any rule. Now, in this particular Facebook group here in Rogue River, there's a rule that says no COVID posts, but the anti-mask, anti-vax COVID deniers continue to post after post after post. And what is their excuse? Because we're being deluged here by all these lies that we have to have it. And there's no post about that because we follow the rules and they don't. Ever. I know we have the moral high ground because we follow the rules, and then they just trample all over us with their aggressive victimhood. That is why we have to have mandates. That is why we have to set our foot down. You let it go on, it's going to be much more of a tantrum. I kid you not. And even the most gentle, the most open, the most persuasive parent sometimes has to resort to a set the foot down, and you know what I mean. You have to be a lot more stern than you ever want to. This is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. You know, you don't have to take the tact of an abuser. But sometimes there's, I hate to say this, there's some children out there who have never grown up, and they're well into their 70s in some cases, or older. But they're kids, and they need to be treated like kids. I'm sorry. Sometimes a little bit of mom and dad has to be, put to the fore. Grounding, maybe? Maybe. As I've stated, they already have the gated communities all built. They already have their little lake marinas with their little lake water feature. Got all the strip malls with the Botox strip mall clinics. Everything. Got their strip mall liquor stores. They've got the Albertsons, and I don't know what else. Oinky Doinky supermarket. They got all that. They're totally self-contained. They wanted a gated community to keep themselves separate from, well, shall we say, polite society. Because their idea of politeness is rather garish. Look at the strip malls. Look at that damn water feature in the fake lake with a fake lake marina. My God. Bread and circuses, Jesus. Doesn't take much, does it? All we have to do is turn the guard shacks around. Might have to add a few more guard shacks, but turn them around. They'll never know. You want a pass to get outside? You can get one. You have to go through the council. Yeah, the council. All right. Well, that dystopian novel isn't so dystopian now that I think about it. It might have to be policy. I don't know. They're kind of forcing our hand, aren't they? And like I said, the longer you wait to set your foot down, the worse the tantrum is going to be. Might have to take them out of the department store because of all the carrying on. Just might. Okay. As I said, dystopian world now has policy. Yeah. What's on the menu here in the curated part of this salon that we, call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as we begin here on this fine Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, the Biden administration is considering expanding a policy that limits the use of no-knock warrants by federal agents. I think there should be no no-knock warrants, okay? Apparently, too many citizens, and that means innocent people, are being killed. Less people have been killed by defective garage doors because the garage door opener malfunctioned. And, they put the kibosh on that. There's a product liability. Hey, come on. If the cops are just a tool, then there's some product liability issues here. Is there not? Yes, there is. The IRS will suspend the use of facial recognition technology to identify taxpayers. You know, it's kind of like Big Brother. Kind of like it is. And the House is preparing a short-term spending bill to keep the government open. And apparently David and Joan spoke about that early on in the show, their show today. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Germany's state-funded broadcaster Deutsche Welle was right to suspend 5 employees and take actions against 8 others following a probe into antisemitism. And Canadian police cracked down on the COVID-19 truckers, seizing thousands of gallons of fuel and an oil tanker, while a court silence the constant blaring of trucker horns. Coming to a D.C. near you. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for being, the Kelly Lincoln, and thank you. If you would look across the page to the left, there is the link to our Patreon page, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it helps us tremendously. I cannot even begin to tell you. I've tried. Every time we do a show, 5 days a week. But it helps us pay our bills and continue with the constant upgrades of software and hardware. And your patronage has helped us tremendously to be able to do that. Over almost 11 years, by the way. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, and if you could send those funds our way once a month, it will, as I mentioned, help us attack those terrible increases in costs in the upgrades of hardware and software and the bills, too. They never go down. Jeez. Can't wait till that happens. Anyway, we do appreciate your patronage. Your generosity really helps us fulfill our civic duties, you know, as the founders originally intended. They did. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. And thank you, Tom, for taking care of that and a whole hell of a lot more. If you would follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms, of course. But that's where the real reportage is, and you can find then the real source material. Because that is important. Indeed. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. And, of course, the deep archive for the library of Netroots Radio shows over these many 11 years, almost 11 years, can be found at the Internet Archive. Yep, they're all there, the deep archive, we call it. Links provided, and we'll get the update on our homepage at netrootsradio.com real soon with the mentioned links. Alrighty. Where am I going? Well, I'm going to this first offering here that I've presented here in this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We are, of course, in the Bistro Cafe part of it. The chef's table's in the back. We'll get to it. For the amuse-bouche. We do that at the end here because we're Americans. And this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays is out of the Associated Press by Colleen Long and Michael Balsamo. The Biden administration is considering expanding a policy that limits the use of no-knock warrants by certain federal agents. Now, a no-knock warrant, as its name implies, is an order from a judge that allows law enforcement officials with a search warrant to enter a home without announcing their presence first. You know, breaking and entering by the state. It's an exemption to usual practice. In most cases, the law requires that officers must knock and announce themselves before entering a private home to execute a warrant. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said yesterday, Monday, that President Joe Biden was looking into whether to further limit federal agents' use of the tactic after a local SWAT team in Minneapolis fatally shot Amir Locke, a 22-year-old black man, curled up in a blanket. 6:30, 6:15 in the morning. Legal gun owner. Let's all remember that. Not named on the warrant. Never been in trouble with the law. Yeah, they're going to start saying he was no angel. Look what they did to Tamir Rice, the little 12-year-old. He was no angel. I don't like the idea of how you execute a search warrant. That doesn't mean you get to execute the subject of the search warrant. Okay? Maybe these people who are in the law enforcement need to go to police academy school a little bit longer so they can tell the difference between executing a search warrant and executing the subject of a search warrant. And this person, Amir Locke, was not the subject of the search warrant, was not named on it. Does that remind you of another killing late at night? Private home, Breonna Taylor, same police force. I think there's something wrong with that police force, you would think. Now, the Justice Department announced in September that it was curtailing the use of no-knock warrants by its federal agents. Psaki said Biden is now weighing an expansion to other federal agencies. Agents and officers in Homeland Security, for example, also use the tactic. Fatima Hussein from the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The IRS said yesterday, Monday, it will suspend the use of facial recognition technology to authenticate people who create online accounts after the practice was criticized by privacy advocates and lawmakers. The agency said it would no longer use a third-party service called ID.me for facial recognition. Critics of the software said the database could become a target for cyber threats, in Cyrillic. They also expressed concern about how the information could be used by other government agencies, among other concerns. Government agencies maybe from other governments. Earlier Monday, Senate Finance Committee Chair and my senator, Ron Wyden, the guy who gets things done, called on the agency to end its use of the ID.me software. After the IRS announced the practice would be suspended, Wyden said, quote, "The Treasury Department has made the smart decision to direct the IRS to transition away from using the controversial ID.me verification service. No one should be forced to submit to facial recognition to access critical government services," he added. The IRS is currently grappling with a worker shortage and an expanded workload from processing tax filings and administering pandemic-related programs. Legislation that would have given the agency billions of dollars to more expeditiously process returns is stalled. I wonder how that happened. A little fly in the ointment left from, the previous guy. This final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A top Democrat unveiled compromise legislation yesterday, Monday, that would keep the government functioning through March 11th and give lawmakers more time to finish overdue spending bills for this year. Congressional approval in the coming days, which was expected, would avert a federal shutdown when temporary funding expires the night of February 18th. A House vote was planned for today, while the Senate schedule was unclear. We are close to reaching a framework government funding agreement, House Appropriations Committee Chair Rosa DeLauro, Democrat of Connecticut, said in a statement about bipartisan talks over bills covering this year's agency budgets. But we will need additional time to complete the legislation in full, she added. The short-term bill would continue last year's spending levels, but it includes $350 million for the military to drain fuel from huge underground storage tanks in Hawaii near Pearl Harbor that have been blamed for contaminating local drinking water. Since November, around 1,000 people have complained about water that smells like fuel and said they have become ill. Unlike some years, neither party is angling toward a political shutdown that would precipitate an election year shuttering of government. Democrats controlling the White House and Congress want to show voters they can govern effectively, and Republicans want to make sure that they destroy the United States from within and turn it over to a hostile foreign government so that we all learn Cyrillic, in this reporter's opinion. Okay, let's go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series. This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research and help you understand what it really means. I'm Josh Fishman, Scientific American's senior health editor. Tanya Lewis, usually here with me, has the day off. Today, the giant Omicron wave looks like it may have peaked in the U.S. We will look at its unusual effects on two groups, children and people with long-haul COVID. And we'll talk about a dramatic worldwide vaccine milestone. Omicron cases look like they are starting to drop down in many U.S. states, but they're coming down from staggering heights. By mid-February, about 40% of the U.S. population will be infected by the variant. That's an estimate from Trevor Bedford of the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle, who models infection rates. And that's changed one important feature of the pandemic: kids getting sick. With earlier variants, very few children got seriously ill. But recently, an average of about 800 children have been admitted to the hospital with COVID every day. For kids under 5, the hospitalization rates jumped to 2 to 4 times that of previous waves. What's going on? Has the virus mutated to become worse for kids? Probably not, scientists say. What we're seeing is a consequence of the overall vast number of Omicron infections. There's a saying, a small fraction of a big number is still a big number. And that seems to be what's going on with kids in COVID. A small portion of infected kids have always gotten seriously ill. Now we have a lot more infected kids, about 1 million in the first 2 weeks of January alone. So even if the portion of infections that need a trip to the hospital stays the same, the absolute number is going to jump up. The good news is that Omicron actually seems less severe than the earlier variant, Delta. Rong Zhu, a data scientist at Case Western Reserve University, looked at health records of 80,000 kids and found the Omicron hospitalization rate was 1%. With Delta, it was higher, at 3%. But again, with a lot more infected kids, that 1% turns into a bigger actual number. One thing about Omicron that may make it harder on kids is where this variant likes to hang out and multiply. Earlier versions of the virus went deep into the lungs. This one, however, seems to like the airway above the lungs, including the throat. Kids' airways are tinier, so it's easier for them to be clogged with mucus and inflamed with infection. That leads to conditions like croup, which includes a racking, barking cough that alarms parents. But again, some good news. Croup symptoms usually go away in about 3 days. Ibuprofen can reduce the pain and the swelling. Steroids help in more serious cases. It's a familiar illness and doctors know how to treat it. Call one if your kid is having trouble breathing. The other group of people that's probably going to be hit by Omicron's huge numbers are long haulers, or people with what's called long COVID. After their initial infection, these people struggle for months with a cluster of disabling symptoms. The list includes deep fatigue, shortness of breath, body pain, and headaches. It can be impossible to work or to take care of your children, hard to cook or do other things that are basic parts of daily life. Doctors now estimate that 14 to 30% of people who get the coronavirus suffer from this syndrome. And as with kids in Omicron, the percentage isn't as important as the actual number. Because the wildly contagious variant has infected tens of millions of people, if only a small fraction of those who catch it develop long COVID, millions could be burdened with symptoms for months, if not years. And just because many Omicron cases are mild doesn't mean such people are immune from lingering symptoms. David Petrino, a rehabilitation medicine specialist at the Icahn School of Medicine in New York City, told my colleague Melinda Wenner-Moyer that people with mild illness do go on to get long COVID. A study in the UK found that ongoing health problems were only weakly linked to severity of illness. One thing that does reduce the frequency of long COVID is vaccination. Another UK study showed that if people were fully vaccinated and got a second breakthrough infection, only 5% had symptoms after a month, but 11% of unvaccinated people did have serious symptoms. In the US, a study found vaccinated people were 7 to 10 times less likely to report long COVID problems months after their initial diagnosis than were non-vaccinated people. So, just like with acute COVID, shots help eliminate the risk of a long haul. Across the globe, there now have been 10 billion COVID vaccine shots given out, a major milestone this month. There are 20 different kinds of vaccines, and 4.8 billion people have received at least one dose. That is 60% of the population on our planet. And that's in just over a year, an unprecedented rollout of medicine. These have not quite been the shots heard around the world, however. Most of them have gone to people in richer countries. In poor countries, just 5.5% of people have received a full dose regimen. In the entire continent of Africa, more than 80% of the people have not gotten even one dose, according to a news story in Nature magazine. Not only does that inequality put people in low-income countries at much higher risk of disease, it also raises the risk of new coronavirus variants evolving in those areas. And as the past 2 years have taught us, these variants don't stay at home. The way out of the pandemic is better global distribution. We're getting there. 10 billion doses is a big number, but we need to get there even faster. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us. Our show is produced by the inimitable Jeff Del Vicio. Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly. Stay safe and check out Siam.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Good eating habits developed in childhood can last a lifetime, but getting children to eat their fruits and vegetables is a common problem. Eating them adds important nutrients, helps control weight, and reduces the risks for many serious illnesses. Children in the U.S. are eating more fruit. However, 60% of children get fewer fruits than recommended, and 93% don't get enough vegetables. Childcare, schools, and school districts can help change this by meeting or exceeding federal nutrition standards for meals and snacks, including fruits and vegetables wherever food is offered, and helping children learn about and taste fruits and vegetables. At home, parents can eat a variety of fruits and vegetables with their children and provide them as snacks, even if it takes many tries. Also, parents can include their children when shopping for, growing, and preparing fruits and vegetables. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Can a person who is intellectually disabled be executed? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Theoretically, no, because the Supreme Court in 2002 held that the Eighth Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment forbids the government from executing people who are intellectually disabled. But there's what the law says, and then what the law does. Rodney Young, who in Georgia in 2012 was convicted of killing the son of a former girlfriend, was classified in school in the language of that time as, quote, mentally retarded. But he was sentenced to die anyway because the government in a criminal case, as we all think we know, has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But a Georgia law requires the defendant in a death penalty case to prove his intellectual disability beyond a reasonable doubt, a standard that no capital defendant in Georgia has ever met. The reason for this legal upside-downness was simply sloppy draftsmanship, according to the representative who wrote the law. Georgia is the only state with this requirement. Other states require the defendant to prove the disability by the usual civil standard of preponderance of the evidence. The Georgia Supreme Court recently upheld this law, and the Supreme Court is being asked to review that decision and decide whether a state can impose such an enormous burden on a defendant who is asserting a constitutional right and whose life hangs in the balance. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal, and that they have the unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Nevertheless, slavery was firmly entrenched in the American economy by 1776. At the Philadelphia Convention in 1787, the framers successfully avoided using the word slave in the Constitution but the document contains many provisions that protected slavery and the interests of slaveholders, such as the 3/5 Compromise and the Fugitive Slave Clause. These and other compromises were made to ensure that the Southern states would join the Union, but doing so would set the stage for a brutal civil war that almost ended the American experiment and would continue centuries of discrimination against African Americans, the effects of which still impact the nation today. Nevertheless, the story of the more than 400 years since slavery was first introduced into the 13 colonies is one of expanding rights and greater equality for all Americans. Over the next 28 days of Black History Month, 60 Second Civics will explore this story, and we will learn about African Americans whose lives and accomplishments advanced the great cause of liberty and equality in the United States. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Each and every day, labor's history continues to be written. Such is the case in North Carolina. On this day in labor history, the year was 2014, which saw a massive protest in Raleigh, North Carolina. The protest was part of the Moral Monday movement. Moral Mondays started off as and continued as a series of protests against policies enacted by the Republican legislature and governor of North Carolina. These policies included restricting voting rights, changing tax policies to benefit the wealthy, and slashing unemployment benefits. Nearly 1,000 Moral Monday protesters were arrested in 2013. On this date, Moral Monday brought at least 80,000 people into the streets of Raleigh. The protesters had 5 demands. First was to secure pro-labor, anti-poverty policies that ensured economic stability. They also demanded quality public education, access to health care and environmental justice, reformation of the criminal justice system, and safeguarding voting rights. The North Carolina AFL-CIO has been a staunch supporter of the effort. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten made a trip to Raleigh for the protest. She said of the protest, people are searching for fairness, opportunity, justice, and real change. I believe that search can and should lead to the labor movement. Reverend William Barber II, president of the North Carolina NAACP, has been at the forefront of the Moral Monday movement. He addressed the huge crowd and declared, "You may have thought you were going to discourage us, but instead you have encouraged us. The more you push us back, the more we will fight to go forward. The more you try to oppress us, the more you will inspire us."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 63. And, pretty much, foggy. It's quite foggy at the moment, and some clouds this morning. Later on will give way to generally sunny skies in the afternoon, and a few clouds overnight with lows in the low 30s. And then mainly sunny tomorrow with highs in the mid-60s, winds light and variable throughout that time. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 54 and cloudy. Paris is 52 and cloudy. Rome is 60 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 34 and cloudy. Kabul is 26 and fair. Hong Kong is 57 and cloudy. Tokyo is 42 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 65 and clear. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and sunny. And New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. An independent panel said that Germany's state-funded broadcaster Deutsche Welle was right to suspend 5 employees and recommended further action against 8 others following a probe into allegations of antisemitism. The 3-member panel, which included a former German justice minister, also urged Deutsche Welle to end the cooperation agreements it has with some Middle East broadcasters and to more closely scrutinize others. But it concluded there was no structural anti-Semitism within the Arabic department at Deutsche Welle, despite an accumulation of individual instances that gave cause for concern. The broadcaster responded with a 10-point plan that includes tightening its code of conduct, improving staff training, and vetting its partners more thoroughly. Deutsche Welle provides broadcasts and online content in 32 languages, including Arabic, Russian, and Chinese. It also provides media training through its in-house academy.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anna Mailer-Paperney, David Lundgren, and Ishmael Shakil of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Police in Canada's capital said yesterday, Monday, they had seized thousands of liters of fuel and removed an oil tanker as part of a crackdown to end an 11-day protest against COVID-19 measures, adding truck and protest numbers had fallen significantly. The protest, which has gridlocked Ottawa, has been largely peaceful but ear-splitting horn blaring by protesters, saw a court on Monday grant an interim injunction preventing people from sounding horns in the city's downtown. The so-called Freedom Convoy, consisting of truckers and other motorists, started as a movement opposing a Canadian vaccine mandate for cross-border drivers. A requirement mirrored by a U.S. rule has morphed into a rallying point against Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's public health measures. Trudeau, who appeared on Monday yesterday for the first time in nearly a week after being infected by COVID, said the protest has to stop. Responding to an emergency debate in the Parliament, Trudeau denounced the tactics used by demonstrators. This is a story of a country that got through this pandemic by being united, and a few people shouting and waving swastikas does not define who Canadians are. Trudeau and his family left Ottawa to an undisclosed location as the convoy started rolling into the city due to security concerns. The protests last week included some Confederate and Nazi flags. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.